more
Right.
is about what you sent me in the talking points. I know you've talked about this, the fact that Amtrak, when Nixon 30 years ago said, yeah, they might lose money for a couple of years, and then they'll be self-sustainable. 30 years later,
you know, I gave that note to my producer, George Zoops, and I said it was LBJ, and the brain room went crazy. I can't find LBJ saying this. I forgot it was 1970 because I thought this was done under a Democrat pre-68. It was done by a Republican administration and a Democratic Congress. They forced the railroads to merge. New York Central and Pennsylvania Railroad became Penn Central. And Richard Nixon said, President Nixon, it's only going to last 3 years. Don't worry about it. We'll sell it and we'll make money on the deal. And look at what happened. The government's run Amtrak at a loss every year for 40 years.
It is, and we're going to talk about that. I know you've got to go back to your, I guess we're coming up. Just last answer, but I know you want to get back to your guest very quickly, Judge, and then we'll continue on the strategy.
Okay, absolutely. Congressman Paul, I got to tell you that I was scandalized to see these handwritten notes. I don't know whose notes they are, whether it's Senator Grassley or Senator Shelby, gutting H.R. 1207, claiming that they're making it stronger and precise, but gutting it. This is your bill to audit the Fed.
Well, we're kind of eavesdropping up here because
and they want to limit the Fed to audits of something that we've already seen the audits of.
Ron Paul, and they're talking about nationalization. That's the whole issue here. And we were just talking to the judge about this, and I hate to interrupt because I know that Congressman Paul is about to jump in here. But Judge, Congressman Paul is about to jump in here. But Judge, we were just talking about Amtrak, and Martha and I talked about this at the top of the hour, where all of a sudden we have 30 years ago where President Nixon said, or almost 40 years ago, President Nixon said, Amtrak might lose money for a couple of years, then they'll be self-sustainable. And we heard kind of the same thing. 40 years later, we still have Amtrak. They're still losing money. We heard kind of the same thing a couple of days ago, Judge, with GM.
A couple of days ago, we heard the president say, I don't want to be the president of GM, and I don't want to run an automobile company, and this is just temporary, and pretty soon GM will be profitable, and it'll pay the government back. The government will have, by the end of this bankruptcy, the government will have given GM $50 billion taxpayer dollars. Some people on either side of the aisle, liberals, conservatives, Republicans, Democrats, socialists, libertarians, predict it's going to be another $20 billion a year. How is GM possibly going to sell enough cars to pay the government back?
And here's another thing that you might be able to answer, maybe one of the scarier things. I was talking to Ray LaHood, the Transportation Secretary, earlier. One of the scary things maybe for Ford is the fact that the judge pointed out, in these days, you cannot compete with Amtrak. It is illegal to start a company to compete with Amtrak right now. And if you're a Ford Motor Company who is taking no money, and all of a sudden you have Chrysler, we have lobbyists paid by taxpayers lobbying a government company, and you're Ford who hasn't taken this money, you're thinking, well, what's going on here? Is this a fairness?
Congressman Paul and I have talked about this. Brian Kilmeade and I have talked about this on radio. You and I have talked about this. The government tilts the playing field to favor its own patrons, to favor its own entities. So the government owns Chrysler, or soon will. The government owns GM, or soon will. What will the government do when people who don't want to buy from a government-owned company start buying from Ford? The government will do something like, well, we'll give you a tax credit if you buy something that our companies have manufactured, and you won't get that tax credit if you buy something from Ford. Just like UPS and FedEx can't compete with the post office for first-class mail. Just like if you want to provide electricity in the Tennessee Valley Authority, you can't compete with that federal entity. Just like if you wanted to run a train line from Boston to New York, you can't compete with Amtrak. The government will make it impossible or financially not feasible to compete with its companies. That's not the free market.
And what about lobbying? What about constitutionality about lobbying? Will you have people from General Motors going to Capitol Hill to lobby? And then, well, we can't hear. By the way, we cannot hear Ron Paul because of it's the whole online thing.
Didn't understand
So,
that.
Congressman, we apologize. We're going to get you back to the judge. We can't hear you if you talk to us because of some kind of quirk in the system. But, Judge, you go back to this lobbying thing. Is there some kind of constitutionality about the fact that taxpayers are paying for lobbyists to lobby the government?
Well, sure. Look, the problem with the Constitution here is that nobody abides by it in the executive branch. Ron Paul and some members of Congress have complained about this. When Harry Truman seized the steel mills during the Korean War and literally took them over and tried to tell them what to do, you can't have a strike and you have to manufacture munitions, the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. Today, nobody even makes the constitutional argument. But think about it. The government is making up rules as it's going along. The government is asking the Congress for whatever it wants. The Congress and the government, by that I mean the executive branch, don't care about any constitutional prohibitions on this. So taxpayer dollars are going to go to GM to hire lobbyists to lobby the Congress in behalf of GM. It's a circular movement of taxpayer dollars with rules being changed retroactively. That is not the free market. Free market means free from government management and control. We are now getting the opposite.
And now, by the way, you can smoke this, eat this, and you have to drive this. Judge Andrew Napolitano, it's the Strategy Room. It's streaming live on FoxNews.com. He is the senior judicial analyst. Congressman Ron Paul, thank you, sir, for standing by while we did this. Martha, back down to you.
Thank you, Trace. Ron Paul, Congressman, I apologize for that. There was a glitch in the system. I thought we were going to be able to get you on FNC. Oh, okay. We will next time. 1207, okay. A bill that has gained incredible support from both sides of the political aisle. Liberals, conservatives, believe it or not, some big government types, and obviously those who believe in the Constitution and the free market. Your bill to audit the Fed. I have in my hand something I thought I would never see, which is a piece of paper with a portion of your bill on it and handwritten changes written in the handwriting, I believe, of Senator Charles Grassley, claiming he's in favor of the bill. But if you read the handwritten changes and if they became law, as I understand it, it would gut the bill and severely limit the auditing of the Fed to some financial deals that we already know about. The guts of what we want audited would escape your bill if the Grassley amendments become law.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's similar to what they did in 1978. There was a cry at that time to audit the Fed, and a bill was passed. The GAO was given the authority to audit the Fed, and then they listed these 4 or 5 things that they were exempt for, all the important things. Now, in a way, Grassley does the same thing. He says, well, we can audit this, and he does provide some auditing in a very narrow sense, but the very important things, monetary policy, the agreements between international banks and central banks and other governments and international organizations, that's all still exempt. So the fear now is that people here, and I'm getting questions on the floor, hey, Grassley did it, you know, why worry about your bill? So this has undermined it. So we're going to stick to our guns. We're going to stick with 1207. If 1207 gets passed, it does everything that Grassley pretends to do, plus the important things as well.
Why do we all need to know what the Fed has done, where the money has come from, where it's gone, and what the deals are that have moved the money around?
Well, because the Federal Reserve is so powerful, they're more powerful than the U.S. Treasury and the Congress. We gave $700 billion under TARP funds, which was atrocious and very harmful, and we can't keep up with that. But we're talking about trillions of dollars. But we're talking about manipulating a market, central economic planning, and we're involved through the Fed in foreign policy as well. So if there is a third world nation that's having trouble, they can bail out a third world nation and give them credits that can go out and buy weapons. So it's very involved, and we don't know to what degree they do this, but we're denied this information. I used to think the Fed was only involved in foreign policy because we spent the money that we didn't have, so we monetized the debt, and that allowed us to do more things when we should. But it's much bigger than that. Now they do it behind the scenes, and we're not allowed to know. That is why this attitude, which is very healthy right now, and the reason our bill is getting the attention with 189 co-sponsors, is that people in this country are fed up and they want transparency. They want to see and know what's going on, not only with TARP funds, but now they know the Fed is involved. This has never happened before. I think since 1913 have the people ever rose up and said, look, we want to know what's going on. So in a way, this crisis that we have has offered us an opportunity and a real challenge. We either win this fight or we lose our country, I'm afraid.
The president is in Saudi Arabia preparing to fly to Egypt to give a speech to the Muslim world. Usually we know ahead of time what the president's going to say. We don't know ahead of time this time. What would you like to hear from him, and what are you afraid you might hear from him?
Well, I haven't thought too much about what he should say or shouldn't say. I would just as soon he stay at home, and talk to him on the telephone or invite him over and chat with him, but tell him we want to be friends with whomever we're talking to, and that we believe in free trade and that we believe in sound